My sister Golden Child once invited me to meet her children. The children began to tell me how aggressive she was. They were afraid of her. Hi everyone. I've never written anything like this before, but I feel like I need to get it all off my chest. I'm Sarah, 35, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been overshadowed by my older sister Amanda, who's 38 now. Growing up with her was like living in a twisted soap opera where I was always cast as the villain. Here's my story. Amanda was the golden child. That wasn't just in my head. It was a fact that everyone in our family seemed to acknowledge. She was smart, pretty, and always had the right words to charm anyone, from our parents to the neighbors. But that charm? It was just a mask. Beneath it, Amanda was manipulative and cruel, especially toward me. I remember one particular evening when I was about 6 and Amanda was 9. We were playing outside with chalk on the driveway. I'd drawn a silly little sun with a smiley face, and Amanda accidentally smudged it with her foot. When I started crying, she ran inside screaming that I'd pushed her. My mom stormed out, didn't even ask what happened, and grounded me for 2 days. Amanda watched from the porch, smirking like she'd won a trophy. This became a pattern. Every problem, every mess, every broken vase or missing cookie was somehow my fault. Amanda would spin these elaborate lies, weaving tiny truths into them to make them believable. Like the time she spilled orange juice on the living room carpet and swore I'd been running around with the cup. I wasn't even home when it happened. I'd been at a friend's house, but my parents didn't believe me. Why would Amanda lie? My dad would say. She's always so responsible. I wanted to scream every time I heard that. But what was the point? They'd already decided who I was. The troublemaker, the liar, the problem. As if it wasn't bad enough at home, Amanda found ways to make my life miserable outside of it, too. When I was in 5th grade, she told our neighbors, the Petersons, that I'd stolen money from their son Jimmy. I hadn't, of course, but Amanda's story was so detailed. How I'd been sneaking around their house during a playdate, that they believed her. Jimmy stopped talking to me, and soon, the other kids on the block followed his lead. By the time I got to middle school, Amanda's lies had built an entire persona for me. The sneaky, untrustworthy little sister. Teachers treated me differently because Amanda had warned them about my supposed bad behavior. Kids whispered about me in the hallways. I was isolated, and Amanda thrived on it. I think the worst part of my childhood came when I was 14. Amanda had just started dating this guy, Ethan. He was 17 and had a car, so of course she thought she was the coolest person on the planet. One day, she came into my room and told me, "If Ethan ever looks at you, I'll make sure Mom and Dad send you to boarding school." I was terrified, not because I wanted Ethan to look at me. He was an arrogant jerk, but because I knew Amanda could make good on that threat. She had our parents wrapped around her finger. Sure enough, a few weeks later, Amanda caught Ethan talking to me at a family barbecue. He'd asked me where the bathroom was. That was it. But Amanda stormed into the house, sobbing, and told my mom I'd been flirting with him. My mom dragged me into the kitchen and started yelling about how inappropriate I was. I tried to explain, but Amanda stood there with fake tears streaming down her face, shaking her head like she couldn't believe how low I'd sunk. That night, I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I really was the awful person Amanda made me out to be. The only time I felt any relief was when Amanda went off to college. For the first time, I wasn't living under her shadow. My parents even started to see me in a different light, at least a little. I got better grades, made a few friends, and started to feel like maybe I wasn't the villain after all. But Amanda wasn't done with me. She'd come home for holidays and immediately start stirring up drama. She'd criticize my clothes, my friends, even the way I walked. Once, during Thanksgiving dinner, she told everyone I'd been caught cheating on a test. That was a complete lie, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Looking back, I realize how much of my life was shaped by Amanda's lies and manipulation. She turned everyone against me, even people who should have known me better. I've spent years trying to untangle the web of stories she spun, but it feels like every time I make progress, another one of her lies resurfaces. Even now, as adults, Amanda still has this hold over my parents. They talk about her like she's a saint, and when I try to bring up the past, they brush it off. That's just how sisters are, my mom says. But it wasn't normal. It wasn't fair. I've tried therapy, journaling, everything I can think of to move past this. But sometimes, the memories come rushing back, and it's like I'm that little girl again, crying on the driveway while Amanda smirks at me from the porch. I don't know if I'll ever have a good relationship with her. Part of me still hopes she'll change, that she'll admit what she did and apologize. But another part of me knows that's never going to happen. Amanda's too good at playing the golden child, and she has no reason to stop. I guess I'm sharing this because I need to know. Am I crazy for feeling this way? Has anyone else had a sibling like Amanda? How do you move on when the people who hurt you never acknowledge what they did? When I turned 21, I packed my bags, said my goodbyes, and left my hometown. It wasn't a dramatic exit. No shouting matches or slamming doors. Just me quietly walking away from a life that had felt like a prison for as long as I could remember. Amanda and my parents didn't seem to care much. Amanda smirked, as if I'd finally given her what she wanted. The house to herself? My mom asked, "Are you sure you'll be okay without family around?" And I nodded, biting my tongue because, let's be honest, they weren't exactly a family to me. I moved to a mid-sized city in another state, far enough that I wouldn't run into anyone from home, but close enough that I didn't feel completely untethered. The first few months were a struggle. I'd saved up just enough to afford a crappy studio apartment on the edge of town, where the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Grayson, coughing every night. The sink dripped constantly, and the place had a faint smell of mildew no matter how much I cleaned. But it was mine, and that mattered. I found a job as an entry-level marketing assistant at a small local agency. It wasn't glamorous. Most of my work involved creating boring social media posts for dentists and local gyms, but I was determined to make it work. I didn't know anyone in the city, so I spent most of my evenings alone, eating cheap microwave meals and scrolling through job boards, dreaming of something bigger. One night, about 3 months after I'd moved, I heard a knock on my door. It was Mr. Grayson. He was holding a plate of cookies and smiled kindly, though his face looked tired. "Thought you might like some company," he said. I hesitated. Years of Amanda's lies had left me wary of strangers, but I didn't want to be rude. I let him in, and we ended up talking for hours. He told me about his late wife, his grown children who rarely visited, and his love for gardening. It was the first real conversation I'd had in weeks. Over time, Mr. Grayson became a kind of surrogate grandfather to me. He'd invite me over for dinner once a week, and I'd help him with small tasks around his apartment. He even taught me how to grow herbs on my windowsill, though most of them didn't survive my neglect. My job, meanwhile, started to improve. My boss, Lisa, noticed my knack for writing catchy headlines and gave me more responsibilities. I started handling bigger accounts, like a trendy coffee shop chain and a boutique clothing store. It felt good to be trusted for once, to have someone see my potential instead of writing me off like Amanda always did. About a year into my new life, I met Marissa at a networking event. She was a graphic designer, a little older than me, with bright red hair and a loud, infectious laugh. We hit it off immediately. Marissa was everything I wasn't: bold, confident, and unapologetically herself. She invited me to her weekly trivia night at a local bar, and though I was nervous, I went. That's where I met our trivia team: Jake, a software developer with a terrible sense of humor; Priya, a nurse who somehow always knew the answers to obscure science questions; and Caleb, a bartender with a sleeve of tattoos and a quiet charm. Trivia nights became my anchor. For the first time, I had friends who cared about me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. We'd spend hours after trivia talking about everything from movies to politics to embarrassing childhood stories. They never judged me when I shared pieces of my past, even when I hinted at the mess my family had been. One night, after trivia, Caleb walked me home. We'd been doing this for weeks, but this time felt different. He asked about my family, not in a nosy way, just curious. I told him about Amanda, how she'd made my life hell, and how leaving had been my only way to escape. Caleb listened quietly, then said, "You're stronger than you think. You know that?" His words stuck with me. I didn't feel strong most of the time, but maybe he was right. I'd left everything behind, started over from scratch, and built a life for myself. That took strength, didn't it? Things were going well, too well, as it turned out. One afternoon at work, I got a call from an unknown number. I ignored it, but they left a voicemail. It was Amanda. Sarah, Mom and Dad are worried about you. You never call, you never visit. Are you too good for your family now? Her voice dripped with fake concern, the kind she used when she wanted to guilt-trip me. I deleted the voicemail without responding, but Amanda didn't stop. She started calling more often, leaving messages about how our parents were heartbroken that I'd abandoned them. It was all lies. I knew they barely noticed my absence, but it still got under my skin. Then, one day, she went too far. I was at work when Lisa called me into her office. She looked concerned, holding a piece of paper. Sarah, I got an anonymous email this morning. Someone claimed you lied on your resume and fabricated your work history. My heart sank. Amanda. It had to be her. Lisa didn't believe the email, thankfully, but the damage was done. I spent the rest of the day shaking with anger. Amanda hadn't just tried to ruin my childhood. She was trying to sabotage the life I'd built far away from her. That night, I called her for the first time in years. Why are you doing this? I demanded as soon as she answered. Doing what? She said, feigning innocence. You know exactly what. The emails, the voicemails, the lies. What do you want from me, Amanda? She laughed, a cold, mocking sound that made my blood boil. Oh, Sarah, you're so dramatic. I was just trying to help. Maybe if you hadn't burned bridges, you wouldn't have to worry about people questioning your integrity. I hung up on her, shaking with rage. That was the moment I decided Amanda would never have power over me again. I blocked her number, told my parents not to share my contact information, and focused on my life in the city. Cutting Amanda out wasn't easy, but it was necessary. With her out of the picture, I threw myself into my work and my friendships. I started taking night classes to improve my marketing skills and eventually landed a promotion to account manager. My trivia team celebrated with a karaoke night, where Caleb and I sang a terrible duet of Don't Stop Believin' Da. He kissed me afterward, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Even with Amanda's attempts to interfere, I had built a life I was proud of. It wasn't perfect, there were still bad days, and the scars from my childhood hadn't fully healed, but it was mine. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And that, to me, felt like the ultimate victory. It had been over a decade since I'd last spoken to Amanda. I was 35 now, settled in my life, and thriving. Cutting ties with her had been the best decision I'd ever made. My career in marketing was stable. I had a close-knit group of friends, and Caleb, now my husband, was my rock. I rarely thought about Amanda, and when I did, it was usually with relief that she was no longer in my life. Then, out of nowhere, she reached out. The email landed in my inbox on a random Tuesday morning. The subject line read, "Aunt Sarah?" My stomach churned as I opened it. Her tone was warm, almost saccharine, and entirely unlike the Amanda I remembered. "Hi, Sarah. I hope this email finds you well. It's been such a long time, and I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I have 2 kids now, Jacob, 13, and Emily, 11, and I'd love for them to meet their aunt. They're such wonderful, curious kids, and I think it's important for them to know their family. Let's put the past behind us and reconnect. What do you think? Love, Amanda." My hands shook as I read her words. The audacity of it. After years of torment and manipulation, Amanda thought she could waltz back into my life like nothing had happened. Still, I couldn't deny my curiosity. She had kids, 2 of them, and despite everything, a part of me wondered if they deserved to grow up knowing their aunt, away from Amanda's lies. I showed Caleb the email that night. He read it carefully, his expression unreadable. "It's up to you," he said finally. "But remember, people like Amanda don't change overnight." "Against my better judgment," I replied. I kept it short and polite, agreeing to meet her and the kids at a neutral location, a casual cafe near a park. If nothing else, I wanted to see for myself what kind of mother Amanda had become. When the day came, I arrived early. The cafe was bustling, the air filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the murmur of conversation. I'd chosen a corner table near the window, where I could see anyone approaching. My nerves were on edge, and I regretted not bringing Caleb for support. Amanda arrived 10 minutes late, her kids in tow. She looked older, of course. Lines around her eyes and mouth hinted at the passage of time, but her posture was still as poised and confident as ever. Jacob, a lanky boy with unruly dark hair, and Emily, a petite girl with bright eyes, followed her closely. They looked nervous, glancing around like they weren't sure what to expect. Sarah. Amanda's voice was syrupy sweet as she approached. It's so good to see you. I forced a smile, standing to greet them. Hi, Amanda. She hugged me, an awkward, stiff gesture that felt more like a performance than genuine affection. Then she turned to the kids. Jacob, Emily, this is your Aunt Sarah. They murmured polite hellos, their expressions wary. Amanda ushered them into seats and ordered drinks for everyone, chattering away as if we were old friends catching up. I nodded along, unsure of what to say. I wanted to talk to the kids, to get a sense of who they were, but Amanda dominated the conversation. Finally, Jacob broke the tension. Mom says you were kind of a troublemaker when you were younger, he blurted, looking at me curiously. My heart sank. There it was. Amanda had already started spinning her web, feeding them the same narrative she'd built during our childhood. I wouldn't say that, I replied carefully, glancing at Amanda. Your mom and I just had different experiences growing up. Amanda's smile tightened, but she didn't contradict me. Instead, she redirected the conversation, talking about Jacob's soccer team and Emily's dance recitals. I went along with it, trying to connect with the kids in small ways, asking about their hobbies, their favorite subjects in school. They warmed up to me gradually, though Jacob remained cautious. As the meeting wound down, Amanda leaned in with a conspiratorial tone. It's so nice to see you again, Sarah. I've missed having family around. Maybe we can make this a regular thing? I nodded noncommittally, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to give the kids a chance to know me, but another part of me feared the chaos Amanda might bring back into my life. Over the next few weeks, Amanda became relentless. She texted and called constantly, sending pictures of Jacob and Emily and inviting me to family outings. I kept my responses brief, trying to maintain some distance, but she pushed harder every time. One afternoon, I got a call from Caleb. You're not going to believe this, he said, his voice tense. Amanda just posted a photo of you with her kids on Facebook. She captioned it, so happy to reconnect with my troubled sister. Family is everything. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Troubled sister? She was already setting the stage, painting me as some kind of wayward relative she was graciously forgiving. I called her immediately, furious. What the hell are you doing, Amanda? I demanded. What do you mean? She said, her voice dripping with innocence. You know exactly what I mean. That post. You're making me look bad. Oh, don't be so sensitive, Sarah, she said lightly. People love a good redemption story. I'm just showing them how far you've come. I hung up, seething. Amanda hadn't changed at all. If anything, she'd gotten worse, craftier, more calculated. She wasn't reaching out to reconnect. She was using me to bolster her own image. Despite my anger, I couldn't bring myself to walk away completely. Jacob and Emily had started texting me directly, asking questions about my life and sharing stories about school. I could tell they were curious about me, and I didn't want to let Amanda's lies shape their perception of who I was. One day, Jacob called me out of the blue. Aunt Sarah, he said hesitantly, can I ask you something? Of course, I replied, trying to sound calm. Mom says you used to steal things when you were a kid. Is that true? I felt a lump rise in my throat. How many lies had Amanda told them? No, Jacob, I said firmly. That's not true. I never stole anything. Your mom and I just didn't get along, and sometimes she said things that weren't fair. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I thought so, he said quietly. You don't seem like a thief. His words broke my heart. Even at 13, Jacob was starting to see through Amanda's facade. I wondered how long it would take for Emily to do the same, or if she ever would. In the weeks that followed, I found myself caught in a delicate balancing act. I wanted to be there for Jacob and Emily, to show them a version of family that wasn't built on manipulation and lies. But every interaction with Amanda felt like walking into a trap, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she tried to twist the situation to her advantage. I don't know where this road will lead, but one thing is clear. Amanda hasn't changed, and she probably never will. The question is, how do I protect myself from her while still being there for her kids? It's a question I wrestle with every day, and I don't know if I'll ever find an answer. When Jacob and Emily first started asking me about my childhood, I wasn't sure how to respond. They were curious, naturally, and it was clear they'd begun to notice that some of the things Amanda had told them didn't add up. I could see it in their hesitant questions, the way they phrased things carefully, as if testing the waters. The first real conversation happened during one of their visits to my house. Amanda had dropped them off under the guise of wanting me to bond with them, though I suspected she was just looking for free childcare. I didn't mind. I enjoyed spending time with Jacob and Emily. They were smart, thoughtful kids, and I wanted them to feel like they could trust me. We were sitting in the living room, the three of us sprawled across the couch with bowls of popcorn between us. We just finished watching a movie when Jacob suddenly turned to me and asked, "What was Mom like when you were our age?" The question caught me off guard. "Your mom?" I repeated, stalling for time. She was confident, always knew what she wanted. Jacob frowned, clearly unsatisfied with my vague answer. "Did you two get along?" I hesitated. How much was too much to share? I didn't want to badmouth their mother, but I also didn't want to lie. "Not really," I admitted. "We were very different. Your mom was more outgoing, and I was quieter. Sometimes that led to misunderstandings." Emily, who had been unusually quiet, piped up. "Mom said you got into trouble a lot." I felt a pang of frustration. Of course, Amanda had painted me as the troublemaker, just like she'd done all my life. "I think your mom and I saw things differently," I said carefully. She had her perspective and I had mine. Jacob gave me a sharp look, his dark eyes filled with curiosity. "She said you used to lie to Grandma and Grandpa all the time." I sighed, setting my popcorn bowl on the table. "I think your mom remembers things in a certain way. But no, I didn't lie to Grandma and Grandpa. I try to be a good kid, just like you two are. Sometimes things got blamed on me that weren't my fault." There was a long silence as they processed this. Finally, Jacob asked, "Like what?" I hesitated again, weighing my words carefully. "Well," I said slowly, "there was a time when I got in trouble for spilling orange juice on the carpet. But it wasn't me, it was your mom. She told Grandma and Grandpa I did it, and they believed her." Emily's eyes widened. "Mom did that?" I nodded. "It was a long time ago, and people make mistakes. But that's why I think it's important to ask questions and get all sides of the story." Jacob looked thoughtful, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. "Mom said you broke Grandma's vase once," he said after a moment. I couldn't help but smile ruefully. "I remember that vase. I didn't break it, but I got blamed for it." Emily frowned. "Why would she say you did it if you didn't?" I shrugged, trying to keep my tone light. Maybe she was scared of getting in trouble herself. It's hard to say. The conversation ended there, but I could tell it had left an impression. Over the next few weeks, Jacob and Emily started asking more questions, not just about me, but about Amanda, our parents, and what life had been like when we were kids. They were piecing together a puzzle, and the more they learned, the more they began to question the version of events Amanda had given them. One afternoon, Jacob called me while I was at work. I stepped into a quiet corner of the office to take the call, wondering if something was wrong. "Aunt Sarah," he said, his voice low, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, leaning against the wall. "Did Mom really get straight A's in school?" he asked. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. "Not exactly," I said. "She was a good student, but she wasn't perfect." "Why do you ask?" "She's always telling us how hard she worked and how she never got in trouble," Jacob said. "But it doesn't sound like that's true." I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Your mom worked hard in her own way," I said carefully. "But like everyone, she had her ups and downs." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "It just feels like she wants us to think she's perfect," Jacob said quietly. "But nobody's perfect, right?" "No, Jacob," I said gently. "Nobody's perfect, and it's okay to ask questions when things don't make sense." That evening, Emily called me with a similar question. "Mom said you were jealous of her when you were kids," she said. "Were you?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. I don't think I was jealous, I said slowly. I think I just wanted to be treated fairly. Sometimes it felt like your mom got all the attention, and I felt left out. Emily was quiet for a moment. She does that with Jacob and me too, she said finally. She acts like Jacob is the smart one and I'm just there. My heart ached for her. Emily, you're smart in your own way, I said firmly. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are. You're kind, creative, and thoughtful. Those things matter just as much as grades. She didn't say anything, but I could hear her sniffling on the other end of the line. Thanks, Aunt Sarah, she said softly before hanging up. Over time, these conversations became more frequent. Jacob and Emily were starting to see their mother in a new light, and while I didn't want to encourage them to resent her, I also couldn't deny them the truth. I answered their questions honestly but carefully, always trying to frame my responses in a way that wouldn't hurt them more than necessary. Amanda, of course, had no idea these conversations were happening. She continued to send me texts and emails, acting as if everything was fine between us. But I knew it was only a matter of time before she found out. And when she did, I had no doubt there would be consequences. The cracks in Amanda's carefully constructed persona began to show gradually, but once Jacob and Emily started noticing, it was like a dam broke. I could see it happening in little ways at first. Offhand comments, quiet glances between the two of them, and then, eventually, the pointed questions. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when I first realized how much things were changing. Jacob and Emily were at my house, sprawled out in the living room while I cooked lunch. Emily was flipping through an old photo album I'd pulled from the closet, giggling at pictures of me as a kid. Mom looks so serious in these, she said, pointing at a picture of Amanda at her 8th birthday party. Was she always like that? I laughed, setting down a plate of sandwiches. She could be pretty serious, yeah. She liked everything to be just so. Jacob, who'd been silent until then, looked up from his phone. Mom said you were the one who always wanted things to be perfect. I paused, unsure how to respond. I don't think that's true, I said carefully. I like things neat, sure, but your mom definitely had her own ideas about how things should be. Emily looked thoughtful, tracing a finger over one of the photos. She told us she never got mad as a kid, she said softly. But you're saying she did? I hesitated. This was delicate territory. Everyone gets mad sometimes, I said gently. Even your mom. Jacob let out a short laugh. Yeah, she still does. She got mad at me last week because I forgot to take out the trash. Emily chimed in. She got mad at me for wearing my sneakers in the house. The conversation might have ended there, but a few days later, Jacob called me, his voice unusually serious. Aunt Sarah, he began, did Mom ever make stuff up when you were kids? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Why do you ask? I said carefully. Because she told Emily and me that she was the fastest runner in her high school, he said. But when we asked Grandma about it, she said Mom never ran track. I exhaled slowly, trying to think of the right words. Your mom has always been good at telling stories, I said finally. Sometimes she remembers things differently than they actually happened. Jacob didn't say anything for a long moment. It's weird, he said finally. I feel like I can't tell what's true anymore. The next time I saw them, Jacob and Emily were more subdued than usual. We went to the park, something we'd done many times before, but they seemed distracted. It wasn't until we sat down for ice cream that Jacob broke the silence. Mom says she never got in trouble in school, he said, staring at his cone. But Priya's mom said she got detention once for skipping class. I raised an eyebrow. Who's Priya? My friend from school, Jacob said. Her mom went to high school with Mom. She said Mom wasn't perfect like she always says. Emily nodded, her expression serious. It's like Mom's not who we thought she was. I felt a pang of sadness for them. They were starting to see Amanda for who she really was, and I knew how painful that realization could be. Your mom has her own way of looking at the world, I said gently. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Over the next few weeks, they started spending more and more time at my house. It wasn't just casual visits anymore. They actively sought me out. They'd text me after school, asking if they could come over, or call me on weekends, saying they were bored and didn't want to stay home. I never turned them away, but it was clear that something was shifting. One evening, after a long day at work, I found both of them waiting on my doorstep. Amanda hadn't mentioned anything about them coming over, and when I opened the door, Jacob looked embarrassed. "Mom said you wouldn't mind if we came here," he said quickly. I let them in, trying to mask my confusion. Once they were settled on the couch with snacks, Emily looked up at me and said, "Mom was yelling again." I froze. "Yelling about what?" "Just stuff," Emily said, looking down at her lap. "She said we don't listen and that we're ungrateful." Jacob didn't say anything, but the look on his face spoke volumes. I felt a surge of protectiveness toward them, but I knew better than to say anything against Amanda directly. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," I said softly. "You're always welcome here." They stayed until late that night, and when Amanda finally called, she sounded irritated. "Are the kids still there?" she demanded. "I thought they'd be home by now." "They're fine," I said evenly. "I can bring them home if you'd like." "No, I'll come get them," she snapped. When she arrived, her smile was strained, and she barely looked at me as she herded Jacob and Emily out the door. After that, their visits became more frequent, and Amanda's irritation grew more obvious. One afternoon, while we were baking cookies, Emily blurted out, "Mom says you're trying to turn us against her." I nearly dropped the tray I was holding. "What?" I said, stunned. "She said you're making us think she's a bad mom," Emily said, her voice small. I set the tray down and knelt in front of her. "Emily, I would never do that," I said firmly. "Your mom loves you, and I'm just here to be your aunt. That's all." Jacob, who'd been watching silently, said, "Mom doesn't like it when we come here." I felt a pang of guilt. "I think your mom just wants to make sure you're happy," I said carefully. "It's okay to love both of us." But I could see the doubt in their eyes. Amanda's grip on them was slipping, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The cracks in their relationship were growing wider, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came to a head. The first sign that Amanda was trying to limit Jacob and Emily's time with me came in the form of increasingly flimsy excuses. At first, she'd say they had too much homework, or that she didn't want them to bother me too often. Then it escalated. One weekend, she claimed they couldn't come over because Emily had suddenly caught a stomach bug. Yet, an hour later, Emily texted me a picture of her cat and casually mentioned that she was bored at home. I didn't bring it up, but the pattern was becoming obvious. The kids noticed too. Jacob especially. He started sneaking in calls and texts when Amanda wasn't around. "Mom's being weird," he said during one of our calls. "She says we can't come over because you're too busy, but you told me you had the weekend off." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "I think your mom just wants to spend more time with you," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Jacob wasn't buying it. "No, it's not that. She's mad about something." Emily chimed in during another call later that week. "Mom keeps saying you're trying to confuse us," she said quietly. "She doesn't want us asking questions about her stories anymore." I felt a mix of anger and sadness. Amanda wasn't just trying to control the narrative. She was actively driving a wedge between me and the kids. But I knew better than to confront her directly. Amanda thrived on conflict, and the last thing I wanted was to give her ammunition. The situation reached a boiling point during a family dinner Amanda insisted on hosting. She called me a few days earlier, her tone oddly chipper. "We should all get together," she said. "It's been ages since we had a proper family dinner." I knew better than to refuse, so that Saturday evening, Caleb and I arrived at Amanda's house. Her home was immaculate as always, with carefully arranged decor that screamed perfection. Jacob and Emily greeted us enthusiastically, but Amanda's smile was noticeably strained. Dinner started off awkwardly. Amanda dominated the conversation, talking about her recent volunteer work and Jacob's soccer matches as if we weren't already aware. Caleb and I exchanged subtle glances, silently agreeing to let her have the spotlight. But then Jacob, ever the inquisitive one, shifted the tone. "Aunt Sarah," he began, "can you show Mom that photo of Grandma's old car? The one with the dent?" Amanda's smile faltered. "What photo?" she asked sharply. "The one you showed us last week," Jacob said, turning to me. "Mom said Grandma never had a dent in her car, but the picture shows it." I froze, unsure of how to respond. Emily, sensing the tension, added, "In the picture of Mom at her birthday party? She said it was her favorite dress, but in the photo, she's not even wearing it." Amanda's face darkened. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly. "Your aunt must be confused." Jacob wasn't backing down. "She's not confused, Mom. We saw the pictures. Why do your stories not match?" The room went silent. Caleb shifted uncomfortably, and I suddenly wished I could disappear. Amanda's eyes flicked to me, blazing with anger. "Sarah," she said icily, "what exactly have you been telling my children?" I held up my hands defensively. "Nothing, Amanda. They asked about our childhood, and I showed them some old photos. That's it." "Well, clearly it's not just it," she snapped. "You've been filling their heads with nonsense and making me look bad." "Mom, she didn't do anything," Jacob interjected. "We're just trying to understand why your stories don't match the pictures." Amanda turned on him, her voice rising. "Because I don't remember every single little detail from years ago. Jacob, is that what you want to hear? That I'm not perfect?" Her outburst startled everyone at the table. Emily shrank back in her chair, and Caleb reached out to place a calming hand on my arm. "Amanda," he said gently, "I don't think anyone's accusing you of anything. The kids are just curious." But Amanda wasn't calming down. "Curious?" she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "No, they're not curious. They're being fed lies by someone who's jealous of me." That was too much. I stood up, my hands shaking. "I have never lied to Jacob or Emily," I said firmly. "All I've done is answer their questions honestly. If you have a problem with that, maybe you should take a closer look at the stories you've been telling." Amanda glared at me, her face red with anger. "Get out," she said through gritted teeth. "You're not welcome in my home." Caleb stood as well, his expression calm but firm. "We're leaving," he said, guiding me toward the door. "But Amanda, you should think about what just happened. This isn't Sarah's fault." Jacob and Emily tried to follow us, but Amanda stopped them. "Stay here," she commanded, her voice trembling with barely restrained rage. "You're not going anywhere." The car ride home was silent, but my mind was racing. I couldn't believe how quickly things had spiraled out of control. Amanda's reaction had been extreme, even for her, and I worried about what it would mean for Jacob and Emily. The fallout was immediate. Amanda stopped responding to my texts and calls, and she forbade Jacob and Emily from visiting me. But the kids found ways around her rules. Jacob started using a friend's phone to call me, and Emily sent me handwritten letters through the mail. Their messages were heartbreaking. "Mom's really mad at you," Jacob wrote in one text. "She keeps saying you're trying to ruin our family, but I don't believe her." Emily's letter was even more direct. "Mom won't let us talk about you anymore," she wrote. "She says you're dangerous, but I think she's just scared." I didn't know how to respond. Amanda's anger had created a divide that I wasn't sure how to bridge, and I hated the thought of Jacob and Emily being caught in the middle. But one thing was clear. The cracks in Amanda's relationship with her children were no longer just cracks. They were turning into chasms, and there was no telling how deep they would go. The fallout from that dinner spiraled into a nightmare I couldn't have anticipated. Amanda wasn't just angry, she was vindictive. She started telling anyone who would listen that I was manipulating Jacob and Emily, poisoning them against her. At first, it was just family gossip, but it didn't take long for her accusations to escalate. The first sign came in the form of a terse email. I was sitting at my desk at work when it popped into my inbox. The subject line read, "Cease and desist." My heart sank as I opened it. "Sarah, your repeated attempts to interfere in my relationship with my children have gone too far. You've been spreading lies about me and encouraging my kids to question my authority as their mother. If this doesn't stop immediately, I will be forced to take legal action." "Amanda." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Legal action? Was she serious? I forwarded the email to Caleb, who called me immediately. "She's bluffing," he said, his voice steady. "She's trying to scare you into backing off." "Scaring me into what?" I asked, exasperated. I haven't done anything wrong. But Amanda wasn't bluffing. A week later, I received a formal letter from a lawyer's office. It was full of vague accusations, claiming I was alienating the children from their mother and undermining her parental authority. The letter demanded that I cease all communication with Jacob and Emily or face a lawsuit. I was furious. I hadn't done anything to warrant this, and the idea of Amanda dragging me into court over her own insecurities was infuriating. I immediately contacted a lawyer of my own, a calm, no-nonsense woman named Laura. She reviewed the letter and reassured me that Amanda didn't have a case. "This is a scare tactic," Laura said during our first meeting. "She's trying to intimidate you, but there's no evidence to support her claims. Just keep doing what you're doing and document everything." So that's what I did. I saved every text, every email, and every letter from Jacob and Emily. I kept records of our visits, making note of dates and details. It was exhausting, but I knew I had to protect myself. Meanwhile, things were getting worse for Jacob and Emily. They started calling me less often, their messages filled with fear and frustration. "Mom's been yelling a lot," Jacob said during one of our rare phone calls. "She says it's your fault." Emily was even more direct. "Mom's scary when she's mad," she whispered during a quick call. "She screams so loud, and sometimes she throws things." I felt a surge of protectiveness toward them, but I didn't know what to do. Confronting Amanda would only make things worse, and I couldn't risk losing my connection with the kids. Then Jacob came up with a plan. "We're going to record her," he said one evening, his voice determined. "If we have proof, maybe people will believe us." "Jacob," I said carefully, "are you sure that's a good idea? Your mom might find out." "She won't," he insisted. "I'll hide my phone. Emily will help." I didn't like the idea, but I couldn't bring myself to discourage them. If this was what they felt they needed to do, who was I to stop them? Over the next few weeks, Jacob and Emily began secretly recording moments when Amanda yelled or behaved aggressively. They'd send me short clips, their voices hushed as they explained what was happening. In one recording, Amanda could be heard screaming at Emily for spilling a glass of water. "You're so careless," she shouted. "Do you even think about what you're doing?" In another, she berated Jacob for coming home late from soccer practice. "You're just like your aunt," she hissed. "Always thinking the rules don't apply to you." Listening to those recordings was heartbreaking. I could hear the fear in their voices, the way they tried to appease her. I saved every clip, unsure of what to do with them, but knowing they might be important. One night, Jacob called me in tears. "She found out," he said, his voice shaking. "She found the recordings." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" I asked, my heart pounding. "She took my phone and smashed it," he said. "She said I'm a traitor and that I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore." Emily got on the line next, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's so mad, Aunt Sarah. I'm scared." I felt helpless. "I'm so sorry," I said, my own voice breaking. "I wish there was something I could do." Amanda called me the next morning, her tone icy. "You've crossed a line," she said. "I don't know what lies you've been feeding my kids, but this ends now. If I catch them talking to you again, I'll make sure you regret it." I wanted to yell back, to defend myself, but I knew it would only make things worse. Instead, I hung up and called Laura. "She's threatening me," I said, my voice trembling. Laura sighed. "Document everything," she said. "If she escalates, we'll have a case for harassment." The situation felt like a powder keg, ready to explode at any moment. I didn't know how much longer Jacob and Emily could endure Amanda's wrath, and I worried about what would happen if things got even worse. The final straw came a few weeks later. Jacob managed to sneak another call to me, his voice filled with urgency. "Mom's talking about sending us to live with Grandma and Grandpa," he said. "She says we need to be reprogrammed." "What does that mean?" I asked, horrified. "I don't know," he said, "but we don't want to go." I promised him I'd figure something out, though I had no idea what that would be. Amanda was spiraling, and her desperation was pushing her to extremes. All I could do was hold on and hope that the truth would eventually come to light. The legal battle for Jacob and Emily was the most grueling, heartbreaking, and ultimately rewarding fight I've ever endured. It started the day I received a desperate voicemail from Jacob, sobbing and saying Amanda was threatening to send them away to live with our parents. He begged me for help, and I knew I couldn't sit back any longer. I called Laura, My lawyer, the next morning. I want to file for custody, I said, my voice shaking but resolute. Laura didn't sound surprised. It's going to be a tough fight, she warned. But if we can prove that the children's safety and well-being are at risk, we have a chance. We spent the next several weeks preparing. I handed over every piece of evidence I had. The recordings of Amanda yelling, letters from Jacob and Emily detailing her outbursts, and even text from Jacob's friends confirming that Amanda had smashed his phone. Laura reached out to the children's teachers and coaches, who provided written statements about their concerns. Jacob's soccer coach, Mr. Darnell, described how Jacob had missed practices due to Amanda's punishments. Emily's art teacher, Mrs. Foster, recounted how Emily had once confided in her about being too scared to ask her mom for art supplies. Laura also interviewed Caleb and my friends, who had witnessed Amanda's erratic behavior firsthand. Caleb spoke about the night Amanda had screamed at me during the family dinner, and Marissa, one of my closest friends, shared how Amanda had called her to rant about me after the dinner. When we filed the petition for custody, Amanda's reaction was as explosive as I had feared. She called me, furious. "You think you can take my kids away from me?" she screamed. "You're going to regret this." I hung up without responding and blocked her number. Laura assured me that Amanda's threats would only strengthen our case if she continued to act out. The first court hearing was nerve-wracking. Amanda arrived with her lawyer, a man who looked like he thrived on intimidation. She glared at me as we waited to be called in, her fury palpable. When the hearing began, Amanda's lawyer painted me as an interfering aunt who was trying to steal her children out of jealousy. He accused me of manipulating Jacob and Emily and claimed that I had overstepped my boundaries by showing them photos and sharing stories about their mother's childhood. But our evidence told a different story. Laura presented the recordings, letters, and testimonies, painting a clear picture of Amanda's volatile behavior. Jacob and Emily had both submitted statements through a court-appointed child advocate, explaining how scared and unhappy they were at home. Jacob's statement was particularly powerful. He described how he often felt like he had to protect Emily from their mother's outbursts. The judge granted me temporary custody pending a full investigation. Amanda was livid. She stormed out of the courtroom, shouting that I had brainwashed her children. I held my breath, waiting for the backlash. In the weeks that followed, Jacob and Emily moved in with Caleb and me. The change in them was almost immediate. Jacob, who had been withdrawn and anxious, began to relax. He started going to soccer practice regularly and even tried out for team captain. Emily, who had always loved drawing, spent hours in her room painting and sketching. I bought her a set of professional art supplies, and her face lit up like Christmas morning. One evening, after dinner, Jacob told me, "It's so quiet here. No yelling, no slamming doors." I didn't know it could be like this. I hugged him tightly, feeling tears prick my eyes. "This is your home now," I said. "You're safe here." Amanda, meanwhile, was unraveling. The court allowed her supervised visits with the children, but these quickly became contentious. During one visit at a local family center, she screamed at Jacob for not answering her calls and accused Emily of siding with the enemy. The supervisor reported the incident to the court, adding to the growing evidence against her. Amanda's behavior continued to deteriorate. She showed up at Jacob's soccer game unannounced, shouting at him from the sidelines and accusing me of turning him against her. The coach asked her to leave, and she responded by throwing a water bottle onto the field. The incident made its way into the court records, further damaging her case. As the 6-month review approached, the court-appointed advocate interviewed Jacob and Emily again. This time, their confidence was clear. Jacob spoke passionately about his love for soccer and how much better he felt living with Caleb and me. Emily proudly showed the advocate her paintings, explaining how happy she was to have her own space to create. When the day of the final hearing arrived, I was a bundle of nerves. Amanda's lawyer argued that she was being unfairly judged for her parenting style and claimed that the children were being manipulated by me. But their own statements told a different story. Jacob, now 14, stood before the court and said, "I love my mom, but I feel safe with my aunt. She listens to me and doesn't yell all the time." Emily, clutching a small sketchbook, added, "I just want to stay where I can be happy." Their words sealed the decision. The judge granted me full custody, citing Amanda's inability to provide a stable and nurturing environment. Amanda was allowed supervised visits, but was required to attend anger management and parenting classes before any changes to the arrangement would be considered. As we left the courtroom, Jacob and Emily hugged me tightly. "We're free," Jacob whispered, his voice filled with relief. Our new life began slowly but steadily. Jacob threw himself into soccer, and by the end of the season, he was named team captain. Emily's talent blossomed. Her paintings grew more intricate and expressive, and her art teacher even entered one of her pieces into a local competition, where it won first place. We settled into a routine filled with laughter, love, and mutual support. Caleb, who had been a steady presence throughout the ordeal, became the father figure Jacob and Emily had never had. Together, we created a home where they could thrive. Amanda's visits dwindled over time. Her behavior during the supervised sessions remained erratic, and the children began to dread seeing her. Eventually, she stopped scheduling them altogether. I couldn't say I was surprised, but it still hurt to see her give up so easily. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Jacob looked at me and said, "Thank you for fighting for us." I smiled, tears welling up in my eyes. "You're worth every bit of it," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything we had been through, we had found a way to move forward together. Our family wasn't traditional, and it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like everything was exactly as it should be.